Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. We're thrilled the media is here, and we appreciate your continued partnership in providing information to the public. My name is Olga George. I am the press secretary for the city of Pittsburgh and Mayor Ed Gainey. We will be taking some questions after the press, everyone, the speakers have spoken. Today, Mayor Gainey will speak regarding the specific impact of the April 29th storm, an event that tested the resilience of our infrastructure and emergency responses. Now, it's now my honor to introduce the Honorable Mayor Ed Gainey. Sir.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning. I want to appreciate it. Also want to, thank the Department of Public Works. I want to thank our first responders and the utility workers that worked through this horrific storm. Also want to, thank the residents out there for the kindness and the patience they've had, which I know was very frustrating. I definitely feel your frustration. Just want you to know that I appreciate the kindness that you've given one another. And I just want to say thank you. The devastating thunderstorms we faced last week were not just another severe weather event. They were a powerful reminder of the growing and increasingly complex threats facing our city. Our city has always demonstrated strength and resilience in the face of adversity, and we did that last week. But resilience alone is no longer enough. We need more than resilience. We must act with intention, foresight, and unity. Traditionally, hazard mitigation planning has been seen as a reactive process, a tool we use only in response to specific disasters. But the risks we face are evolving. The storms are getting much, much more severe than they were. They're driven by climate change, no question about it, aging infrastructure, and long-standing social disparities. I saw this firsthand last week in the morning after the storm, walking through Homewood. I spoke with families who lost power. These challenges interest and amplify one another as I continue to speak to people in the community about equality and what that looks like. Today we take a major step forward. I'm announcing an executive order that redefines how Pittsburgh prepares in disaster situations by launching the development of a comprehensive, all-hazard mediation plan. This is more than just a document. It's a shift in mindset. From reactive to proactive. Really, that's what our comprehensive plan is all about. From isolated strategies and fixes to integrated action. From generalized plans to community-centered solutions. This new approach is rooted in 5 key principles. Comprehensive risk assessment. We will use the best available science and data to understand all the hazards we face, natural and human-made, and how they affect different parts of our city. Climate resilience. Climate change is no longer a distant threat. It's here and we all see it. Our plan will incorporate future climate scenarios and adaptation strategies to safeguard our people and our infrastructure. Social equity. Social equity. Not all communities face the same risk or have the same capacity to recover. We will prioritize the needs of our most vulnerable residents, who are often the hardest hit and recover last. Community engagement. Resilience begins with the people. This plan will be built with the input from across our city, ensuring that every neighborhood has a voice in shaping safer futures. Integrated planning. Hazard mitigation cannot exist in a vacuum. It just cannot exist in a vacuum. This plan will align with our broader goals around sustainability, housing, public health, and equity. Breaking down silos and building a shared solution for this whole city. Making sure that the vision we put forth keeps safety first. To lead these efforts, the executive order directs Chief of the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security and Director of City Planning to work together, unifying long-term visions with immediate preparedness. This all-hazard mitigation plan is an investment in Pittsburgh's future, a future where all residents, regardless of zip code, are protected better, prepared better, and know how to respond in case of an emergency. Let's be clear, this is just not about survival. It's about making sure our climate resiliency is in place to deal with the issues that we have right now. It's about building a Pittsburgh where every resident in every zip code can live safe with dignity and opportunity, no matter what challenges may come our way. Thank you.
Now we'll hear from Chief Darrell Jones, PhD. The City of Pittsburgh Bureau of Chief Jones will share insight into the emergency response challenges encountered during the storm and the pressing need to incorporate climate resilience into public safety planning so that our first responders are equipped not just for today's emergencies, but for tomorrow's as well. Chief Jones?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The idea of resiliency is something that we've been working on here in the city of Pittsburgh with the beginning of the Gainey administration. What do I mean by resiliency? Resiliency means that we can take a hit and then quickly recover from the hit like we did the hit from the storms last week. The idea of resiliency, though, starts with the community. The federal government outlines the whole community approach to emergency operations and emergency planning and resiliency, and that's what we were in the process of doing right now. Part of that process from the community effort is our community emergency response teams. This is everyday citizens who are prepared for a disaster, and because they are prepared, they can get together and help their neighbors. As severe as this storm was, it wasn't an apocalyptic storm. It wasn't a storm in which first responders themselves were victimized. So first responders were able to respond and start the immediate recovery. However, a more severe storm may have hampered that. And so we are encouraging people, the residents, to be resilient by having supplies for 72 hours in case of an emergency or a disaster. Another part of that resiliency is the training that we have to do with each other. We need to make sure that we take care of ourselves, and then we have to take care of our infrastructure. The infrastructure here in the city of Pittsburgh is aged. We are in the northeastern part of the country, one of the oldest cities in the country. Some of my stations here in the city are older than some of the states in this country. Therefore, we have to make sure we have redundancy in our critical infrastructure and key resources. It is my job as the emergency management coordinator to make sure that we have everyone working together in the same sandbox. No overlap or duplication of effort. And this was demonstrated last week when my deputy, Adam Emil, managed this incident with the highest level of professionalism. And I really want to thank him for the job that he's done. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Chief Jones. Now we will hear from Jamil Bey, the Director, PhD, Director of City Planning, who will speak about how the city will embed climate resilience into our long-term planning strategy, rooted in data, equity, and a community-driven approach. Dr. Bey.
Thank you. Good morning. I want to thank the mayor, thank Olga for this. I want to begin by just taking a minute to recognize the scale and seriousness of the damage that Pittsburgh experienced during that April 28th storm. Families were left in the dark. Entire neighborhoods were blocked by downed trees, and critical services were interrupted. Some for days, and in a few cases, more than a week. There were households in my neighborhood in Overbrook that were restored last night. This wasn't a routine storm, but it was a wake-up call and a vivid and painful example of what climate change looks like when it reaches our doorsteps. What we experienced last week is exactly what scientists have been forecasting for our region: more frequent, more intense, and less predictable weather events, driven by changing climates and an infrastructure system that wasn't built for today's conditions. The executive order acknowledges what we must all now accept. These events are not isolated. They're part of a larger, accelerating pattern, and they demand a serious, coordinated, and forward-thinking response. Under the mayor's executive order, the Department of City Planning, working closely with the Emergency Management Coordinator, will lead the development of Pittsburgh's first all-hazard mitigation plan. This will not be a theoretical or a symbolic plan. It will be an active, evolving strategy to help our city prepare for, respond to, and recover from climate-related hazards. Whether it's severe storm, flooding, landslides, extreme heat, or other shocks to our system. And crucially, it will reflect the lived experiences and priorities of Pittsburghers, especially those in communities most vulnerable to disruption and displacement. Resilience planning, as the chief said, is not something that any single department can do alone. That's why this effort will involve deep collaboration across city government and beyond. We're going to work alongside our colleagues in public safety, public works, mobility and infrastructure, and permits, licenses, and inspections. Our partners in the county, the Commonwealth, and the federal agencies involved in disaster response. Utility providers who maintain critical systems like electricity and water. Academic researchers who bring valuable data, forecasts, and context. And most importantly, the residents, advocates, and grassroots leaders who've been calling for action and equity long before this storm. We will ensure that the voices of all neighborhoods are heard and that our strategies account for how different communities are impacted, putting equity at the center of our planning. This plan is not just about storm response, it's about repairing historic harm, closing vulnerability gaps, and building systems that work for everyone. As the mayor said, resiliency begins at the household level. Oh, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but it's individuals who are resilient. We know that the impacts of climate change are not distributed evenly. Communities that have long faced disinvestment are also the most exposed to climate risk. Our job is to not only address the emergencies of today, but to chart a course for a more just and resilient city moving forward. So I want to thank the mayor for his leadership and his commitment to a bold, coordinated response. And over the next 90 days, we'll assess what the storm, understand what failed, and identify where we must invest and adapt. In the months to follow, we'll invite the public into the process because resilience isn't built behind closed doors, it's built in community. This is our moment to rise to this challenge and build a city that is prepared, protected, and equitable for generations to come. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate that, Dr. Bay. At this time, we'll take any questions that anyone has. Yes, Julia?
Could you walk us through tangibly what results we're hoping to get from this plan as well as the timeline of cost?
So as far as timeline and cost, I really can't speak to that. But I can tell you that we're hoping that we have a more resilient community and a more resilient city, such that when you take a hit like what we did last week, recovery is quick and we can move on to the new normal. The old normal goes away. We can never have the time that we had before the storms last week. We have to be ready to adapt to the new normal. That process includes future planning. Why would we make sure we develop in an area that might be prone to having effects from a storm or any other natural disaster? That's why I reached out to Dr. Bay to discuss that with the planning that he's doing in the future and part of the committee that he's already been working on. The other part, like I stated, is we have to really help out in the communities. Disaster follows poverty. If you always notice, the most victimized people in a disaster are those at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. And we need to work with them and help them to survive. I mentioned earlier, 72 hours of food, water, and medicine set aside in case of a disaster. However, there are people in town now, single parents, who if I told them, hey, set aside 72 hours worth of stuff, they're going to be like, I can't feed my kids today, and you want me to put food away for something that might happen. These are the challenges that we're facing here, and this is the challenges that we're going to step up and try to find solutions for, and therefore that's why I cannot speak to cost or time. Just going to work until we get it done.
I mean, let me speak to the cost, Julia. I think it's a good question, and dealing with the administration, we don't wait for the plan to be completed to execute the plan. So I think that every phase of the plan that we put together before we execute it will have the cost there, because we're able to look over the variables that gives us the identifies exactly what it's going to cost. So in the beginning, we're just starting this process, but it's a process that has to start, because what we seen in the field over last week, it was horrific. And there was a lot of people, particularly in underserved communities and communities that do have some things that was really impacted by this storm. And that's why right now this is very important that we get this accomplished.
So some of the things that we'd hope to identify, we don't have the advantage of having a blank slate. We have a city that is densely populated. And so as we're thinking about some of these systems that were vulnerable, our power lines, some of our tree canopy, what would we do differently in a city that is populated, to sort of secure those things? What are other cities doing? What are some best practices? And so a part of this is just learning where were we most vulnerable, working with our utility partners and with these other agencies to better understand, what's feasible, considering that we are populated, that we still need to keep the power on and the water running, and that, we need to invest in those systems. And so we're going to learn through the process what's working, what can work, what can we do with the resources that we have and can access, and what can we include into our long-range planning.
Any other questions? Okay.
Chief Jones, we understand that you were not here for the beginning of the storm. Can you walk us through where you were when you returned and what steps were taken to ensure that other officials understood the chain of command in your absence?
Okay, so I was attending the Metro Chiefs Conference in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I left the Saturday before the storm and returned the Thursday after the storm. I was in contact with my supervisor, the Director of Public Safety, both through email, text messaging, cell phone, and online through our virtual EOC. So I was in contact. Prior to my leaving, I did notify my supervisor. I notified my assistants, assigning who was going to be in charge with the Fire Bureau. And I notified Allegheny County 911 that I was going to be gone. Unfortunately, I did not notify the controller or city council, and that's my bad. Right? As far as the EMA part of it goes, that's a team of 4. So there was no written communication. I went in, I talked to all 4 of them. I told them where I would be. Adam is my deputy. I told him that he was at the helm until my return. And so Adam did what he was supposed to do, and he did it very well.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief. Are there any other questions?
I guess I have one real quick. In moving forward with this plan, we're talking a lot about working with the utility providers. Obviously, they had a lot of work ahead of themselves, and they were doing their best to kind of keep up with that situation as well. How does this work with them in ensuring that they're holding up their part to this quote-unquote partnership?
I think that, one, we have to be in communication with them. And I think that, due to where we are at the time of this of nature, that it's important that we're at the table discussing exactly what that looks like. It would be premature for me to sit here and say what that looks like right now with the power companies. I think that we need to sit down and start having dialogue about what that looks like and how we execute in a timely manner. And that's all part of this comprehensive plan. That's the reason why we're doing this. You know me, I don't want to get caught flat-footed. I don't want to be in a situation where we're not prepared. This climate change is real. And we have to make sure that we're climate resilient in every aspect of what we do. That's the importance of the comprehensive plan, to be able to ensure that we're embedding climate resiliency in every part of this plan, whether that's housing, where we can build housing, where we shouldn't build housing, whether it's land usage to determine where we need to put our resources at, whether it's our infrastructure, whether it's our commercial, whatever it may be. At this moment in time, we have not seen the type of storms that we're seeing right now. And everybody should be wanting to ensure that we know where to go if something happens. As you heard the chief talk about, having, if you can, it's difficult. 72 hours worth of food. We talked to the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank. They got over an increase of 25% increase in food because of the food insecurity. There's a lot that we really need to plan if we're going to make sure our residents of this city is safe. There were neighborhoods where they were concerned about the oxygen tank and what they can do. That's why we kept our rec centers and our senior centers open even longer. But instead of just saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, we should have a plan that we can educate the community on about where they need to go, where they can go, what they can do if they're out of food. We need to have a solid plan around this, and that's what this comprehensive plan is all about.
Last question?
Someone touched on this, I'm not sure, but so what are the first actionable steps that the city, that you guys are going to be taking in the immediate, I guess? What can people expect is going to be happening in the field, behind closed doors? What are the first action steps?
So the first thing we're going to do is do an after-action review. We do an after-action review in emergency management for every incident, planned or the planned events and emergency incidents. So we'll do that. We will ascertain and evaluate what we did very well. We will ascertain and evaluate where we need improvement. And that will be the first thing that we would do. And then we will come up with solutions and plans on how to work through that. And we already have some great relationships with our utilities, specifically Duquesne Light. They notify us whenever they're open up their emergency operations center during the storm, and we stay in contact with them. And so the plan that we have in place for severe weather, it worked. But every plan, as they say, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? So we took the hit, and so you have to be very flexible and adjust. No one could ascertain or really predict how many of the trees would come down, how strong the winds would be, and the wire. So our infrastructure is important. The next step will probably be, okay, what can we mitigate right now? What can we do right now? Because the key ingredient to disaster, and without this single ingredient, you have no disaster. That key ingredient is people. If someone's not losing their lives, getting hurt, losing their homes, losing their business, losing their job, there is no disaster. It's just a rainy day, and that area is just a muddy pond. That's all it is. So we have to make sure that the people are taken care of. If they are not impacted, then there's no disaster. The stronger we make individuals and individual families, the more resilient they are, the more resilient the community is, the more resilient the city is.
Hold on, Dr.
And let me just say this. Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead, Doc.
And more details about what that looks like is going to come out of this process. But some of those things, how do we improve household resiliency? What does that look like in that immediate 72 hours? Especially considering that we have disparities. What does that look like? How do we think about that as a city? What else are we learning from other people's experiences that we haven't heard yet? What are other cities doing? And how are we taking our own learning and our own experience and putting that to the table? And so those are some of the things, we're going to kick this off next week, where we're going to have a webinar inviting some folks to sort of publicly go through some of these topics and conversations, invite some of the utilities and some of the council folks and some of the departments to sort of like, what happened, where were you vulnerable? And let's not just do that in a vacuum. Let's have that conversation and take some input. So the details of that, it's next Thursday, but will come out in the press release that we're going to share with you.
And the key, and I think you hear everybody say this, is that, you know, before we used to create plans based on the infrastructure itself. But I think what you're hearing everybody say is that we must put our people first. This was a time that I recognized how devastating this was to the people, and that the people were really impacted in a way that, you know, they didn't know what to do, where to go, trees falling down, power lines down, couldn't get their oxygen tank on. It was a lot, insulin, the whole nine. And, you know, the people I talked to a gentleman in Sheridan the other day, and he was just concerned because his parents are on insulin. And he was sharing with me that, you know, hey, I'm nervous, you know, I've called, you know, we're trying to get it, we worked with him, we got things resolved for him, but, you know, at the end of the day, this plan is about people first, and that's the number one thing we're gonna focus on, is how we save people.
And that said, I appreciate you guys coming out today. Be safe. Thank you.